everybody has their own definition of what is bikepacking. For me, bikepacking is based on at least 2 days of travel, so you need an overnighter. You must go as light as you possibly can, AERO as well, but carry everything you require to be completely self-supported and self-reliant. Credit card bikepacking is not self-supported. You ditch the sleeping and cooking gear, and each night you seek out some form of accommodation. You cook in kitchens or rely on buying meals each day. In places like Western Europe, the latter is obviously a far more expensive way to bikepack. I recently did a credit card bikepacking trip here in Norway and was surprised at how different it was to my regular self-supported trips. Therefore, in this video, I want to look at the pros and cons to this form of bikepacking. Is ditching our tents making life easier, or does losing our self-reliance hinder our journey? Let's look into it. First of all, let's quickly look at my credit card bikepacking setup. If you've seen my other video, which I'll link here, I had about 22 kilos full bikepacking setup. This here, look how much lighter it is. I've got a 2-bag main setup, small half frame bag, and I've got a 17-litre saddle bag. At the bottom here, I've got a toolkit, so all my tools are put in there, and then I've got 750ml and a 500ml water bottle. That's it. That's all you need. This basically takes away about 6 kilos of gear. 6 kilos. When you add up your tent, your roll mat, your sleeping bag, when your cooking gear, your gas canister, extra clothing that you're going to have in the tent because it's cold at night, it all adds up. Well, first of all, speed and AERO. Really aerodynamic, and you go a lot faster. Now with this setup, I was going 3 kilometers an hour on average faster than I usually do. And if you're on the bike for 8 hours a day, that's 24 kilometers more each day without any extra effort in the legs. And if you cycle for 7 days, that's 168 kilometers further with no extra effort. That's pretty phenomenal. Obviously, if it's lighter, then you've got more control on the bike. It's going to be more comfortable on the bike. I mean, it's so light, it's so easy. One thing I should note is that obviously I've got most of my weight here at the back and in the middle. There's nothing at the front. And I'm a big fan of weight distribution and how important that is. When I was climbing, obviously I'm getting pulled back a little bit with the weight here. But in general, because this is such a light setup, it doesn't really make too much of a difference. If I had a small handlebar bag, I would have put that at the front and taken some of the weight here and added it there just for better weight distribution. And so with my trip, I set myself 5.5 days, and then I have no excuses. I've got to do it in them 5.5 days because I've got accommodation booked at each spot along the way. And having that discipline, it keeps you focused, you power out the kilometers each day, you're getting up early to make sure that you arrive at your destination on time, and that is a very good thing in some ways, and in other ways it can hamper your experience as well, which we'll talk about shortly. This might not be the case for everybody, but I find that I meet more people. Staying at campsites, or while camping you don't really meet anybody, and staying at campsites, you tend to find, especially in Norway, the campsites are full of camper vans, they're full of caravans, they're full of basically not your crowd. You might meet 1 or 2 bike tourists, but I tend to not meet many people at campsites. But when I'm credit card bikepacking, I'm staying at Airbnbs, I'm staying at warm showers, I'm staying at hostels, tend to meet more people, and I met a lot of really cool and interesting people along the way with this trip. So it can be quite lonely camping at times. One of the things that people don't realize is that when you've done 8 hours on a bike or 10 hours on the bike, your hard work is not over if you're camping. Once you get to a campsite, or if you're wild camping, you've got to find the place first. You've got to set up your camp, set up your tent, get the roll mat out, pump that up. All that sort of stuff takes time. And then you've got to get your cooking gear out. You've got to start to boil water. And all this is a lot of energy after you've cycled all day. But when you're staying at accommodation, it's just so much easier just to roll up. If you want to cook, there might be a kitchen there, or maybe even someone might cook some food for you. I mean, it's just a lot easier, and it gives you then more time to cycle during the day, more time to enjoy your cycling and not have to stress at the end of the ride to get yourself set up and ready for your evening rest. Weather becomes a lot less of a problem, because if it's raining hard, you know that when you get to accommodation, you're going to be able to dry off, you're going to be able to hang everything up, and everything will be nice and dry by the next day. There's nothing worse in my books when it's absolutely hammering down with rain, and then you have to put up your tent, and then everything is soaking wet, and it's just getting into your tent soaking wet. It's not enjoyable. Then the next day you're on the bike and everything you're wearing is wet. Everything on the bike is wet. I mean, it's just the worst for me. That's the worst situation when it comes to bikepacking. Obviously, the number one drawback is the cost, especially if you're in Western countries with high prices such as Norway. You're going to be looking at probably an average cost of around 75 euros for a budget accommodation each night. Of course, you can get cheaper, and you can see my video here. It tells you about budget accommodations in Norway. But I found that my average was around 75 euros a night. Camping wise, your average would be about 15 euros a night. So that is a huge difference. 50 euros more each night adds up. As I mentioned before, you have to be structured and organized. You know each day where you've got to get to and at what time you have to get there for. And you may come across somewhere really beautiful, or somewhere that you just want to spend time, and you just don't have that option. Especially in Norway, you'll have these kind of like epic routes over the mountains, and there won't be much accommodation, or there won't be any accommodation in that area. And as a result, you may have to just fly over the mountains and push really hard in one day. Well, you're in an area of absolute stunning beauty, and why do you want to rush that? And having a tent, you know, being able to camp in the mountains, especially if the weather is good, is such an awesome thing to do. I love being completely self-reliant and not have to depend on anybody when I'm bikepacking. And the minute you lose your tent, you're then relying on finding accommodation, you're relying on other people. Just the freedom it has having that tent. Whatever that happens, I know I've got sleeping arrangements organised that night, and I know that I can look after myself and not have to rely on anybody else. And that's a big deal for me. There's nothing better than to be able to put your tent up somewhere in beautiful natural settings, by a waterfall, by a lake, seeing the midnight sun. I mean, the views you can have by having a tent, especially in a place like Norway, is incredible, and you'll never get that in a hotel. And which is better, credit card backpacking or regular bikepacking? If your journey is less than a week and you're wanting to cover a lot of kilometers each day and have the budget to credit card bikepack, it's probably the better and more enjoyable solution in my opinion. But without a tent, you have to be more organized, and you may spend valuable time trying to arrange accommodation in remote or busy places. You may also waste money on crap food and overpriced hotels. A tent and a stove solve a lot of problems and dramatically reduce costs every day. They also open the world to the natural world that roof accommodation cannot match. My tent will continue to be an important reason why I bikepack, but on short trips where I want to test my endurance, I'm happy to leave it at home from time to time. What's your thoughts? Which do you prefer? Do you only credit card bikepack, or is a tent or a bivvy essential for your setup? Let me know, I'm interested. Alright guys, ha det bra.